Hello, and welcome to this afternoon's session. My name is Laura Joffre. I'm a journalist with Pioneers Post. So for the next hour and 15 minutes, we are going to explore pathways to a well-being economy, an economy that provides well-being for everyone without over-exploiting planetary resources. This is not the world of today, I don't need to tell you that, but we will hear this afternoon why it is not out of reach. Let's not be mistaken, it will require a massive transformation to be able to transition to a well-being economy. Even, it might mean reconsidering our relationship with economic growth, or even considering degrowing, shrinking our economy. So in a few minutes, I'll be joined on stage by three leaders in their fields to look at the potential of business and finance to drive this transformation. And to finish, I'll be speaking to the amazing Sandrine Dixson-Declève, who is the co-president of the Club of Rome. But first, to introduce you to this concept of degrowth, post-growth, sufficiency, I'll be calling to the stage Timothée Parrique. He's a researcher in ecological economy at the University of Lund in Sweden. Timothée is the author of The Political Economy of Degrowth and of Ralentir ou périr, l'économie de la décroissance. Please welcome Timothée.
I have 5 words for you, and I was hoping to be original, so maybe those are 5 words you have not heard yet at ChangeNOW, or maybe these 5 words have been pronounced repeatedly yesterday, and I will look like an obsolete idiot. These 5 words are: we must urgently dismantle capitalism. So, hello everyone, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I was thinking about one figure that could capture the entirety of the argument that I'm going to present to you today, the argument that led me analytically to that outrageous 5 words I have just spoken. And the figure is this. So you can look at the roller coaster we have here. And in that short moment we have, I want to clarify a few concepts. I want to be talking about economic growth. I want to talk about degrowth. I want to talk about post-growth. I want to talk about objection to growth, about sufficiency, about well-being economy. And I want to make a difference between these concepts. But let me start with these broad 3 phases. Economic growth. When I tell you economic growth, you will think about many different things. Some people will think about innovation, modernity, civilization, well-being. Some people will think about abundance of public services. Some people will think about jobs. Economic growth has become this almost magical totem of our modern economies. And we project into that concept of economic growth all kinds of expectations. And I'm sorry to break it to you. I hate doing this, but economic growth is actually much more boring than this. Economic growth is the dullest thing you can think of. It's just the increase in GDP, gross domestic product, a very dull and old indicators that was born in the 1930s. Economic growth has nothing to do with quality. It has nothing to do with evolution. It is basically an indicator of economic agitation. When I say agitation, imagine a little anthill. And then the ants all of a sudden are just moving around to go and fetch food. Well, macroeconomically, if you look at an economy, and you look at the monetary side of this economy, so basically only the selling and buying of stuff with money, well, when we buy and sell more stuff, that makes GDP goes up. When you understand this, that GDP is a bit of a dull indicator, I think this is the first entry point to realize that it is a completely misguided objective to run an entire economy. Basically, GDP is a volume-based quantity movement indicator. It would be, trying to run your economy just looking at GDP is the very same thing as trying to estimate your personal happiness just looking at the number of steps you take every day. Step, step, step. I can, go from A to C, like really where I want to go, and that makes me happy, I satisfy a need. Or I can just step, step, step. Step, 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 step. The argument I want to develop here is that economic growth in high-income countries today is a bit of that step, 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 an economy being stuck on itself, self-developing its own goods and services just to fit within a system where every single actor organizes its economic activity around the maximization of financial indicators. Income for individuals, profits for company, GDP for governments. We're only looking at the monetary speedometer, and what we want is steps, steps, steps. No matter where we go, I want more steps. The problem with this stepping approach, it could just be just absurd, like a very Sisyphus model of development where the goal is just to have more monetary steps. The problem is that we realize that the more economic activity we have, the more pressure we exert on ecosystems. So now, I don't know if many people here have been talking about green growth. Green growth is this idea that you can decouple economic activity, GDP, monetary agitation. You can decouple it from the use of natural resources. And if indeed you can do this, then you're fine. You can grow forever. We can make more steps and more steps without ever, overshooting planetary boundaries. My research for the last few years has been, I've been trying very hard to show that this is true, actually. Many people don't really understand this, but I would love green growth to be a real thing. Like, that would be like one entire thing off my agenda. Like, I would basically go part-time and spend the rest of my days just surfing. That would be just problem solved. But I've been spending years trying to find evidence that this green growth is a thing, and I have not found any. The problem when we talk about green growth is that we are very selective as to how we define sustainability. Basically, we look at carbon, we look at territorial emission, we look at short periods of time, and then if we find any indication that somehow things are getting a bit better, even though a bit better might mean just slight decrease in emissions, then we, savor the champagne and be like, call it green growth, don't worry, we just send a message to all the degrowthers, all the heterodox economics guys, no need to work on plan Bs, it's fine, we've greened it, it's all good. Problem is, sustainability is not only a matter of just, efforts. The climate is not going to give us a gold star for just good efforts. What we need is to achieve specific environmental thresholds. We need to fall back within planetary boundaries concerning material footprint, use of fresh water, air, water pollutions, greenhouse gas emissions, impact on biodiversity, land change, all of that all together. And the evidence so far shows us that there is no country in the history of our species that has managed to reduce this multi-impact, multi-use ecological footprint while producing and consuming more. When you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I mean, think of one single economic activity that doesn't require energy or materials. Anything involving a human needs energy. You need to eat, you need to wear clothes, you need to move yourself, you need to shelter yourself. And so we realized that this ideal of a dematerialized economy is a bit disconnected from the biophysical reality of the world and from the laws of physics and biology. But okay, so there's a problem with economic growth. If I summarize this twofold problem, first, it is ecologically unsustainable. Even if economic growth was perfectly correlated with quality of life, every time GDP grows, you know, the money appears in the pockets of the worse off in society, and that's so great. Every time, you know, we make more steps, that means, you know, we get new subways and new trams and backlanes. Even if that was the case, there would be a sustainability problem. But we've seen that this is not the case. In high-income countries, economic growth is decorrelated from quality of life. So again, just creating more economic activity for the sake of economic activity is just an absurd objective. And we'll get back to this when we talk about a well-being economy. So why talking about degrowth, and what is degrowth? Degrowth is a downscaling of production and consumption. And at this point, it is the very same thing as a recession. You can see it in your eyes. That's a scary thing to say. But don't worry, because I've got some other stuff at the end of the definition. You can see on the graph. So a downscaling of production and consumption to reduce environmental footprint. First difference between degrowth and a recession. The goal is to target nature-intensive goods and services in parts of the world where these have a very big impact on ecosystems. So this is not just, you know, shrinking the size of your economy for the sake of it. It's just about targeting the sectors, the goods and services that you could reduce in order to shrink your ecological footprint. And then you need to do this in a specific manner. In the degrowth literature, there's these three principles of democracy, social justice, and well-being. They're always attached to the term. So downscaling of production and consumption that is democratically planned. It can be at many different levels. It can be within a cooperative or within any business that has a democratic governance where you decide, okay, we have to produce less. How do we do? What do we start with? Then you decide. Can be within a municipality, within, let's say, some participatory budget. Same thing. We are overshooting our, let's say, water or carbon target. We need to produce less. What do we start with? It can be at the level of a household, or it can be at the level of a country, it can be at the level of a continent. You see, at each of these levels, you need to plan these kind of reduction. And in the way you plan it, you need to take into account inequality. We know this because today, environmental pressures, they are highly concentrated. What does that mean? It means there's a correlation between income and even more so wealth and ecological footprint, okay? So if you want to shrink ecological footprint, it's very ineffective to ask everyone to tighten their belts. You need to look at emissions and pressures in general where they are. And so when you're going to just plan for that slowdown of economic activities, you need first to be very selective as to whose actors you want to just change behavior. And then you really want to take into account the potential risk of such a transition, because we live in an economy that is already unequal. And so planning in a way that is equitable means taking into account responsibility and also vulnerability. And then the last one, while improving well-being, or for the sake of improving well-being, or in a way that is compatible with well-being, you phrase it the way you want. But what's interesting about the concept of degrowth is that, and that's a bold hypothesis I've been exploring in my research. I know it's going to sound crazy, but a smaller, slower economy could also be a sweeter economy. And by that I mean, first, a very statistical thing. If we live in economies where economic growth, GDP per capita, has been decorrelated from quality of life from a long time, then variation in GDP are not going to have a huge impact on quality of life, okay? But then, if we admit that for a number of years we've been having what some economists call uneconomic growth, meaning monetary activities that have more social and ecological cost than benefits. We've been, for example, building things on rich soil, and that has caused the disappearance of biodiversity. The things we've been building we thought were very cool, parking lots, but we realized we lost essential ecosystem services whose value was so much higher than the utility we derive from just being able to park my third car in this parking lot. And so degrowth in that sense, as a reversal of uneconomic growth, makes us richer. I know, like, if you're an economist, call 911 if you start to feel dizzy. So degrowth in that sense, we understand, is a temporary phase. Same as growth, actually, in economy. If you have unmet need, you need to develop some productive capacities. You need to start new businesses. You need to invest in some activities to develop the ability to satisfy these needs. And actually, many countries right now, the most vulnerable countries in the world, will need to do a lot of that in the coming years, which makes it so much important for high-income countries to liberate as many natural resources as possible for that process. So growth as this kind of temporary process of stepping up to a scale where your productive capacity is enough, is sufficient to satisfy the needs of your population. Degrowth is the same. It's a temporary diet, okay? Now we're just in biophysically obese economies with the huge footprints that bears no relation to the carrying capacity of their ecosystems. So we put them on a diet, and we see it's a social, ecological, cultural, political challenge to organize this, but the idea is just at the end of this transition, you have an economy that is smaller, slower, but that fits within its biocapacity. And of course, the analogy I always make is that this should be a diet, not an amputation. I mean, nobody cares about GDP like this. Some people keep focusing on GDP. I'm like, you know, you compare a diet to an amputation, I could cut my leg off and I lose 20 kilos, you know, or I could have a diet and lose 20 kilos. Degrowth is more of a diet kind of transition, which is what I think we should be aiming for. So degrowth, temporary phase, leading to this kind of new equilibrium. The concept of equilibrium that comes back to the limits to growth in the 1970s, so this post-growth economy. I like to call it a steady state economy. So when I tell steady state, imagine an economy will fluctuate slightly. When there's an unmet need, you produce a bit more. When that need is fulfilled, you produce a bit less. When your biocapacity increases, maybe because of technological progress, great. You get potential growth. You don't have to use it if socially it's unnecessary, but you can. Same thing. If you have one of your ecosystems that crashes, it needs a bit of a diet. And then it fluctuates. And that post-growth economy, in terms of software, cannot be a capitalist economy. When capitalism, in the very way that a capitalist system is organized, it's organized around the maximization of the accumulation of capital, which capital, by definition, is a resource you mobilize in order to produce something else that has a higher value than that first resource is. So instead of a capitalist economy, we want that post-growth economy to be a well-being economy. So an economy that is organized around the satisfaction of concrete needs, and where everything, including money, everything monetary, is only a means to that fundamental end, which should be the satisfaction of well-being. This being said, let's discuss. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I can just stay there and just...
Timothée, thank you very much for a very, very inspiring.
Oh, I was supposed to leave, or no?
Yes, I mean, you can stay, but there aren't enough seats for everyone.
Fantastic.
So you would have to sit in a corner.
That's fine. People kind of expect me working on degrowth to sit on the ground anyway. I'll take off my shoes and...
Just chill out. Anyway, thank you so much. Really, really inspiring speech. You're going to have to fight. Anyway, so all this, what does that mean in practice for you? What is the role of entrepreneurs, of investors in all of this? Well, in this next discussion, we are going to discuss how business and finance could drive this transformation towards a beyond growth economy. So before I introduce the panel, let me show you this drawing here. It's by a graphic facilitator called Fanny Didou, and she's literally capturing the essence of the conversations live. So her drawings are going to pop up behind me from time to time during the session, and we'll have a sort of final drawing at the end of the session. But so now, please welcome to the stage our panel. Please, Erinch, Melanie, and Philippe. Thank you. So allow me to make a round of introductions. Let's start with you, Melanie. Melanie Rieback, you are an entrepreneur. You are the CEO and the founder of Radically Open Security. That's a not-for-profit computer security company that you founded in 2014. And you are also the co-founder and CEO of Non-Profit Ventures. So that's the world's first incubator for post-growth startups. So that's businesses who want to basically embrace a post-growth entrepreneurship model. That's where the measure for success is impact and not profit. So over to you, Philippe. Philippe Zaouati, you are the founder and CEO of Mirova. Mirova is an investment management firm that is dedicated to sustainable investment and impact investing. You now have 30 billion euros in circa 30 billion euros in assets under management. So part of it is invested in private assets with directly invested in solutions with a deeper impact focus, and some of it is invested in public funds, so with a more broad, sustainable lens. You've been very involved in building the impact investing ecosystem for the past 10 years. Just for our audience, when we talk about impact investing, it's the idea of investing with the view of having a positive social and/or environmental impact, and at the same time still make financial return. So that's just so we know what we're talking about. Erinch Sahan, you are the business and enterprise lead at the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, where your work focuses on transforming the design of businesses to enable them to pursue regenerative and distributive strategies. So Doughnut Economics, it's a very, very interesting model. I invite you to look it up online. We don't have time to explore it fully today, but it also has this idea of providing for all without overshooting planetary boundaries, hasn't it? You have led the development, in particular, of the Doughnut Design for Business tool. So that's basically to help businesses to engage with the concepts of Doughnut economics. So thank you, three of you, for being here with us today. So I'll start with you, Erinch, with a question. What do we need from business to pursue this beyond growth model?
Is this working? Oh, yes, I'm here. Hi, everybody. Wonderful to be with you. And what an amazing speaker Timothée is, isn't he? I mean, that was just inspiring. And I think the answer to the question actually began in Timothée's talk. He talked about making sure that businesses can make those decisions, take those strategies that allow us to meet the needs of people within the means of our living planet, within the biocapacity that we have. And what we have found at Doughnut Economics Action Lab is that working with several hundred businesses, when we ask those questions of what is needed from business, what is needed from them in terms of actions, investments, strategies, we come up with some really big ideas. Ideas like agroecology, ideas like circular economy, modular product design, ideas like paying enough to your suppliers so that the people in the supply chain can earn a living income or a living wage, paying a fair share of tax so that you're not trying to minimize your tax, but you're paying actually what would be your fair contribution. when you put those ideas on the table of most businesses, what we find is that the business is limited by their own design. They're designed to extract as much profit as possible. They're designed to pursue specific, rigid margin requirements. They're designed to only enable internal reinvestment if it's going to produce a high enough return to satisfy their investors. All of these design choices we've made in business has meant that the businesses around the world are held back. So we've got a huge amount of energy, a huge amount of interest piling in to the win-wins, piling into scenarios where, yes, by doing good, you will also produce a very high return. And that is the minority of the actions needed. The majority of the actions needed actually mean that we're going to test the design of our economy, we're going to test the designs of our businesses. Critically, we're going to test the design of finance. So to make all of this a reality, to unlock those actions that are regenerative, that are working with and within the cycles of the living world, and that are distributive, that are actually sharing value far more equitably with all who are co-creating it, we're going to need to reconsider the deep design of business and bring in big new ideas like steward ownership, where a foundation owns the company, reinvests the majority of profits, social enterprises where the majority of profits are reinvested into the business. Examples like post-growth entrepreneurship that Melanie has pioneered and has created an amazing course and journey for entrepreneurs. Examples coming out of the cooperative movement, hybrids that are emerging, new design models, putting nature on the board, putting workers on the board, bringing in new economic democracy into the model of businesses. These are the designs of companies that unlock the actions, the decisions needed for us to transition in the way that Timothée discussed, that we, all of us, I think, realize we need. But it's a scary transition. It's a scary transition, Laura, because it means we need to leave behind those 20th century, the old 20th century models of business, finance, investment. And while they're producing a few, solutions here and there, they're not getting us anywhere near far enough. We need to redesign all of these institutions, structures, markets to unlock the actions that we need.
Great. And just to pick up on something, like these new models, some companies are already embracing them, aren't they? It's not just something we're dreaming of.
Absolutely. They're doing it actually within an ecosystem that is not designed to support this. They're doing it despite the policy ecosystem. They're doing it despite the financial system that surrounds them. So these are the companies that are absolutely beginning to pioneer solutions. Examples like Einhorn that makes vegan condoms based out of Berlin in Germany. Well, they have a steward ownership model. They have a holocracy model within management. This is unlocking a whole host of really innovative ideas. I mean, examples here as well that I've met of businesses that are putting nature on their board. Faith in Nature is doing that. They're putting Lawyers for Nature as a representative, a voting board member. Nature, Earth has a seat on their board. Examples that have got multi-stakeholder models, examples from around the global south as well, around the world, in India, examples like Last Forest or Sasha or Creative Handicrafts that are worker-owned factories. We've got all sorts of enterprises that are absolutely emerging around the world, and we can supercharge this. We can really accelerate the transition if we are deliberate in redesigning finance to be in service of those businesses, which are in service of nature and in service of society, and redesigning businesses so they fit the realities of the 21st century.
Great. So redesigning finance, Philippe, I'm going to turn to you. So how can finance be not a barrier, but an enabler for this kind of change? What kind of changes are needed? A lot, but is that possible?
Oh, we need urgently to dismantle finance. No, I mean, as Erinch just said, the system itself, by nature, is linked to growth. Finance is linked to growth. All the way it works. I mean, it's very short-term decisions, and all the organization, the behavior of the market players is oriented to growth. When you calculate the value of a company, what do? You discount the future cash flows. That means that you are just measuring the future growth of the company. So it's embedded in finance. So the question is, what do we do? I mean, should we completely change and dismantle finance and use something else? The problem is that this is today the fuel of all the economy. So we have to use it. And so we have to use it as a, in judo, like, you have to use the strength of the people you are fighting with. And I think it's exactly what we have to do with finance. And today, yes, of course, there are new models, social economy, and also what we call impact finance, which is the equivalent of social economy, I would say, in the finance world. But it's very small. I mean, Mirova, you mentioned it. It's 30 billion euros today. So 30 billions seems to be a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But if you compare it to the big asset managers of the world, in Europe, I mean, the biggest one managed 2,000 billion euros. In the world, BlackRock, with the world leaders, managed 10 trillion euros, 10,000 billion euros. So that means that we are still only a very little part of this. And the problem is that green finance, impact investing, I think it's very good. It's something, I mean, there are a lot of very sincere and committed people, and I hope that we are a part of this community. But at the end of the day, all we have done these last 10 years is just adding some layers on the top of the system. And even in the regulation, all the regulation that has been created these last 10 years is about creating new markets, the green bond markets, sustainable fund markets, and special labels, and so on and so forth. But the heart of the system has not changed a lot. So we are still working in an environment which is really very difficult for us to live with, and so we have to use it very smartly. But the good thing is that it gives to the finance industry a huge responsibility. As by nature, it's clearly technically impossible to do create a sustainable economy with the finance as it is today. That means that the finance players have to make some very strong choices. So of course, there is a link between growth and finance. But that means that we must not invest in everything. That we have to choose very clearly to invest in businesses, teams, companies which are providing products and solutions which are within the planet boundaries. Yeah. So yeah. The more you have power, the more you have responsibility, and that's exactly the situation where we are today in the finance industry.
Well, I'd like to bring in Melanie now. You are helping startups to embrace this new model. I'm sure there are a lot of startups here looking to raise VC investment and are probably very worried about losing their soul, right? So, from your point of view, finance, like how can this play a role, like a positive role towards that?
Right. So financial extraction, in other words, usury, is the original sin of both business and finance. From a systems thinking perspective, if we want different outcomes, it means we need to change the incentive structures. The only way in which we can change the incentive structures is by reducing, or better yet, completely eliminating the financial extraction out of business and finance. Businesses externalize costs onto both society and the environment because they are financially incentivized to do so. So in the case of businesses, I think that models like steward ownership provide a partial solution. And I say partial because steward ownership, their emphasis is on dividing, basically splitting profit rights from voting rights. My opinion personally is that there shouldn't be any profit rights at all. We can create foundation-owned companies that then hold 100% of the profit rights and also use a golden share to prevent an exit of that same company. Of course, if you try teaching this at a standard business incubator, people are not going to quite know what to do with this, especially given the fact that most startup incubators, that they're part of their own business model is reliant upon taking equity in their startups, and pushing them to grow exponentially and then to exit. And we don't talk enough about the financial conflict of interest in the startup ecosystem. Same thing in business schools. They get endowments by those who don't necessarily want the status quo to change. But what this means is that first, we need to churn out more little companies like Patagonia. And that's actually what I'm attempting to do with nonprofit ventures. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I'm running a 50-person cybersecurity company who has worked for, among others, Google, the European Commission, the Dutch energy grid, we've tested COVID apps for both the European Commission and for nation states. But at the same time, we do not-for-profit services at cost price on a zero-margin basis for nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society organizations. I visualize business as the most powerful form of activism. And I believe that if we eliminate the financial extraction out of business, then I think any company can become a pure vehicle for positive impact. But this is not the same thing as social enterprise, because the triple bottom line of social enterprise, people, planet, profit, the problem is that not only is profit always in conflict with people and planet, but it's that we don't even understand what profit means. Profit has a double meaning that incorporates two aspects. The first is reinvestable margin, which is what I need to put into my business for stability and growth. The second part is financial extraction, which pays for my private jet and my Lamborghini. And not only is that harmful, also from a systems thinking perspective, but it is indeed even a competitive disadvantage on the market. Because when companies are leaking cash, then it means that's cash that you can't use for R&D, for paying your staff better, for lowering prices, and for providing better quality products and services. It's the same thing with the finance industry. We have ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing. But the problem is the E, environment, is far too popular. And that's because, one, it's sort of easy to measure, and two, somewhat cynically, because it is the easiest to greenwash with. Right? The S is a little bit less popular, but it's still a little popular because, you know, we want to fight poverty. That much is obvious. But the orphan child, the dust that's swept under the rug is the G, governance. And almost no ESG funds are paying any attention whatsoever to the kinds of governance structures that, one, would take financial extraction out of finance, you know, so we can create non-extractive post-growth finance, you know, and also, you know, even just things like applying steward ownership, not only to portfolio companies, but also to the investment funds themselves. And I know that this all sounds extremely radical, but there are examples of investment funds on the commercial market that are actually doing this. One particular example is Snowball Impact Management from London. First of all, they're foundation owned, and second of all, they took their fee structure, the extractive 220 model, so 2% asset under management fees, 20% carried interest, and they reformed that fee structure to be the cost of doing business assuming middle-class salaries and a pension. Imagine that fund managers might be only middle class, right? You know, limited partners need to understand that not only is this not risky, in fact, you're de-risking your investment here because you are eliminating the financial conflict of interest between the GPs and the LPs, but that it's less fees, which essentially means that at the end of the day, then whatever that fund is actually supposed to be doing, that it can, like, for example, stimulating impact businesses, that it can focus on that rather than focusing on enriching the fund manager. And let's face it, a huge percentage of the fund managers are the 1%. So we need to understand with finance, you know, in general, I tell startup founders to stay away from VC because, again, that extractive 20% carried interest, you know, it embeds the growth imperative into startups. If a VC gets 20%, if you do an exponential hockey stick and sell the company, that is a really powerful motivator. So what we need is brave fund managers who are willing to create non-extractive investment funds with steward ownership and reformed fee structures, so then those founders who do need capital have options. And we also need limited partners such as institutional investors and pension funds, but also family offices, NGOs, the whole range, to understand that the problem starts and ends with you, with the asset owners. So you are setting the tone for the entire market because you decide which fund managers to support. Those fund managers decide which companies to create. Those companies either externalize the costs onto society or the environment, and they don't. And this is the approach that we need to take to fix things. And with all due respect to, I use the term post-growth a lot, but this isn't even about growth, because growth is just a byproduct, and the root cause of the necessity for eternal growth is financial extraction. So whether I think a company grows or it shrinks or it stays the same is, to me, not even the issue, but the financial extraction is. So what I personally would like is that we can start talking instead about non-extractive business and non-extractive finance, and understand that there are communities of real-life businesses that are doing this right now, today. In fact, when the session is over, I am running to a soundproof phone booth to talk to a cohort of 20 startups that want to embrace such models.
Thank you, Melanie. Philippe. Philippe.
So you did it. You have a lot of applaud. I'm of course not as radical as you are, but I wanted maybe to build on this. First, about the ESG. The reason why E is so popular also within asset managers is also because there is a strong link between E and profits today. Because it's really very easy to build portfolio with a positive E outcome, because there is a lot of innovation, which is good news, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs here, which are the proof of this. There are a lot of innovation in this space, and so there are a lot of investment opportunities. And so today you can show that you have a financial performance alongside a very strong E impact, which is of course very difficult as far as the S is concerned.
Though, right? Like there are so many environmental strategies that need to be taken forward that don't have the high returns.
Of course.
And these aren't getting the finance. So we're all piling into the nice win-win, celebrating, patting each other on the back, but we're leaving on the side the really big transitions needed in the world of business because it's not meeting the financial parameters of the investors.
I mean, if you want to say that the big part of the finance and the economy is a carbon-intensive economy, I agree. I was just saying that the reason why ESG managers and impact investors are focusing on the E, it's because they are finding some opportunities in the E, and it's more difficult to find some financial opportunities in the S. I was just building on what you are saying. Second point about institutional investor. You are true. I just wanted to give you an anecdote. I mean, we are a kind of financial extractive asset manager, as you tell it. But we have decided to put a part of our carry in our foundation. So we have created Mirova Foundation, and so we have decided to put a part of the carry in the foundation, a strong part of the carry in the foundation. And so that means that the part of the carry which is given to the team is a little bit less than 50% of the carry. Okay? And we went to the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund in order to promote our fund. And the answer was, we do not want to invest in your fund because you give less than 50% of the carry to the team, which is absolutely a nonsense. It's absolutely, stupid. I mean, 40% is largely enough. You would like to decrease to zero, but at least 40% is largely enough. So that means that you are right. All the system and even the institutional investors and the public ones are pushing today to have to give more remuneration to the investment team, because they think that the more this investment team will earn money, the more they will be good, and it's called alignment of interest. So, yeah.
Does that mean that then all this system is against us, basically, and there is no way of changing it?
There is a way. I mean, this is what we start to do, but at small scale, I mean, just giving a part to non-profit is the first very interesting step. So you take a part of this career, of this profit, and you give it to non-profit organization. Yeah. We start with 15%, 20%, because the market is organized like this. If others do 20%, then we will want to stay ahead of the curve, and we will do 30%. And then if the market do 30%, we will do 40%. So yes, there is a way to change this behavior, that's for sure.
Laura, if I can come in, I mean, I'm very excited by this conversation, by what you're saying, Philippe, what you're saying, Melanie, because we finally, we are talking about the structures of business. Finally, we are talking about money. Sustainability is growing up. For 2 decades, I've been part of this world, and nobody talked money. The big boys talked money on the boardrooms, in the CEO lounges, C-suites. We're finally talking what happens to the profits. Ask that question every time you think a company is sustainable. Where does its profits go? Every time you see a company you think is doing well, who's on the board? Is nature represented? Are workers represented? Is supply chain represented? A company that has a supply chain, most consumer goods company, what prices are you paying? Are the prices you're paying enough for people to earn a living wage? Ask about these questions. They get to the structure, they get to the design, and this is exactly what we are working on. So if anybody in the audience, if you're a business, if you're a consultant, if you're an impact hub, if you're an incubator, a business network, if you want to run workshops to explore exactly this conversation, I invite you to go to doughuneconomics.org, and we have a tool to run a 2-hour workshop or a 5-hour workshop to have exactly this journey, exactly this exploration. What are the biggest, boldest actions we need to take that we are held back from currently because of the way we designed our companies? And what would be changes in the design we will need to make in our ownership structure, in our financial model, in the moving away from extractive finance that would actually enable us to do this?
Mm-hmm. Great practical step for our audience here to take. Philippe, would you have some, there are some investors here in the room, a practical step that they could take to help this change? I mean, it's very incremental change that you're describing, probably way too slow for many people who are listening today. But, you have to stay in what's possible, realistic, whatever. If some investors here are interested in taking the same path as Mirova or going further even, what would you advise them to do? Like just briefly, very briefly.
No, I think the important is exactly what you said. I mean, the important thing is that there is a kind of coherence between the investor and the investee. We have, and this is about impact investing, or maybe what you're doing is a step beyond. Yeah, we like to the way we interact with with the companies we invest in, and they have to want to have Mirova as an investor. Because we are going to push them and to help them to improve themselves and to improve their governance as well.
Great. Melanie, one practical steps for the startups here who want to take this path towards beyond growth entrepreneurship.
I think the largest practical step is to educate yourself. Look, if anyone is interested in getting more information or having a chat with me, please connect on LinkedIn. I have a lot of information available online, also on the Nonprofit Ventures website, including 11 hours of video, which is much longer than we have on this panel, because I'm teaching the post-growth entrepreneurship class at the University of Amsterdam, and this tells the entire story of non-extractive business and finance from the very beginning to the very end. There's many topics I wasn't able to cover today, including shareholder engagement, which is also another very large part of fixing this. But what I would say is if you want some more information, please reach out to me, and I can point you in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're over time, so thank you very much, Melanie, Philippe, and Erinch for an amazing conversation. I wish we had hours to talk about this.
I wish we had Timothée with us as well. We could have pulled up a chair.
No, where is he? I don't. Well, anyway, thank you so much, and please a big round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so for the last part of the session, I'll be joined by Sandrine and Dixson-Declève. She's the co-president of the Club of Rome. So Sandrine is an international thought leader on the themes of climate, energy, sustainable development, sustainable finance, and complex systems. She's got many, many roles, including being the chair of the European Commission Expert Group on Economic and Societal Impact of Research and Innovation. She's a senior associate and faculty member of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, and she's an ambassador for the Wellbeing Alliance. So she's also one of the co-authors of a book called Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity. Please welcome to the stage Sandrine Dixson-Declève.
Sit here? Okay.
Great.
You want me? I'm all okay. I'm all mic'd up. However, we can't hear you.
That's it. So you co-preside the Club of Rome. So for our audience, a little bit more information about what the Club of Rome is.
Hello?
So it's a network of
Good.
thought
Can you hear me?
leaders. I think you have about 100 members nowadays. The Club of Rome is dedicated to defining comprehensive solutions to the complex, interconnected challenges of the world. That's quite the mission, isn't it?
Yeah, that's quite a mouthful.
The Club of Rome has been around for a long time.
They have too long, and not enough has happened since.
So yeah, just over 50 years ago, the Club of Rome published a report called The Limits to Growth in 1972. It was a bestseller, millions of copies sold, and it was already warning that the human footprint cannot grow forever on a finite planet. You wish we had listened a bit more. Anyway, so last year, for the 50th anniversary, a group of scientists and economics, including you, published a book called Earth for All.
Yeah, here it is, Earth for All. And by the way, it's at the bookstore if any of you want a signed copy.
So it's Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity.
Yeah.
So the key is in the title. So the book uses computer modeling to explore policies likely to deliver the most good for the majority of people. So this well-being economy we've been talking about very much. So it's interesting because it's not describing a world that's completely utopian. It's actually plausible and feasible. So can you walk us how?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to commend the last panel because I think they were great. And of course, Timothée, who's a real rock star. So bravo to Timothée. I think there are several aspects that were brought up that I want to weave into some of the thinking that we've been doing through Earth for All. One is a little bit what was said around it being scary to rethink, actually, the way in which we develop differently and we address growth. And I would say the reverse. I actually think it's incredibly hopeful. Right. I think part of what I said yesterday is we don't realize just how broken our systems are. We are now suffering from the 3 C's, so climate, COVID, and conflict, and the 4th C, which I want to reinforce, which was Timothée's message, capitalism. Capitalism is not delivering. So beyond the fact that we've grown way beyond the finite boundaries of the Earth, that we've done exactly what the limits to growth indicated we would do, which is start to have these tipping points in the 2020s, we are also suffering, all of us personally, from a quality of life which is not what it was for our parents. And I can say that in terms of my generation, but I can definitely say it in terms of the next generation. So what does that mean? Because I want to bring in an element of, let's shift from the fear, because by the way, the fear is going to be either what is going to mobilize us or what is going to keep us so scared that we'll go into the ostrich syndrome, which is what most people do, including policymakers. So we cannot enable that fear to encroach in terms of the way in which we address solutions. We can only use it as a reality check to wake up in the morning and say, holy shit, I got to get something done. And that is really important. I think the other element I want to bring in is tapping into our subconsciousness of what we've just lived through. The COVID pandemic was a huge wake-up call. It was a wake-up call that actually going back to what was most essential, being with our loved ones, ensuring that we had access to a care economy, which, by the way, is not included in the real economy and should absolutely be. So all of a sudden, we can tap into our own subconsciousness of transformation, because we all transformed. I mean, we're all happy we're not wearing masks, but just think about a year ago, we were. Every single time we came together, we were wearing a mask. We all got vaccines. A lot of people in France didn't, but the fact of the matter is that most of us did get vaccinated. Too many times? Who would have thought? To be told that we cannot transform is utter bullshit. I mean, I want to repeat this. It is bullshit. If we are going to change now, we have to realize that we already have changed. Embody that change. Understand that the system dynamic models that we talk about are not some kind of theory. They're actually a beautiful way to get us out of the mess that we've created. So it's scary, but it's incredibly hopeful. And I think that's a really important message to give. And then I'll give to some of the solutions.
Yeah. So what does that mean? We've talked about business and finance quite a lot. The business of the 20th century, what does that look like then?
Well, the business, and merci Philippe, and Philippe and I have been working together for many, many years, and he's been a real champion in trying to shift the financial system. And Melanie, I fully agree with what you said. I think that the business community, the business model is absolutely the ethos of the problem. It's based on the financial model of the fact that we're moving continuously into a profit motive, shareholder value, short-term value, and that every time we have an incredible business leader like Paul Polman or Emmanuel Faber from Danone, we know that they're getting pushed to the side because actually they are champions of a change. We have to ensure that there is a juxtaposition between the new indicators which we put in place in the economy that place the value that we need so that they give the economic signals to the financial system. The financial system is now what is determining everything that we do, and it shouldn't. We are not taking into consideration the real mechanisms of the economy. We are not taking into consideration the real actors in the economy, as I said, the care economy. But if we start to look at the way, for example, a well-being economy has the three pillars of indicators: environmental indicators, social indicators, and of course, economic indicators. And I agree with Melanie, and let's put in the governance indicators, because my God, the hypocrisy and the lack of integrity that we have across the board, across all our governance models, must be taken into account. If you look at all of that, you place a value in it within your economic system, then all of a sudden your economic system is determining where your capital flows. But for the moment, it is the financial system that is determining our economy. And as I said yesterday, not taking into account the fact that we have SMEs that are the drivers, at least of the European economy, by 98%. All of our decisions are being put into multinational frameworks rather than thinking through that it is people on the ground in small and medium-sized enterprises that are really making sure that we get food on the table, that we actually have access to water, to all the essentials that we need. So I think it's really important to rethink, one, what then is the new consciousness? What are our own consciousness and value systems that we want to bring this to? Secondly, let's ensure that we have the models to bring that forward. Last week was an amazing week. For those of you who were participating or who weren't, and some of us were there at the European Parliament, multi-party green growth conference, absolutely phenomenal. Opened up by the President of the European Commission and also the President of the Parliament. And it's not green growth, sorry, I should not have said that. Beyond growth. Thank you, Lena. It's reminding me, no, Sandrine, that was not about green growth. But to come to that point, and then I'll let you give me your next question. I want to read something that I had in my speech, and I was honored enough to follow President von der Leyen, who actually opened up with talking about limits to growth in the Club of Rome. So it was truly an honor. And she did this knowing full well that her own party was blocking the conference. And I also think that was an important signal. My key message is, and again, this is a little bit what I said yesterday, let us be much more strategic. I agree with Timothée that there are different shades of growth, but we really have to be careful. Because as I said yesterday, the other side is just waiting. Capitalism is strong, incumbents are strong, and all they're going to do is just make sure that we bicker with each other as to what is the color of our growth model. And I want to be very clear that yes, there is room for all of it as long as we shift towards new indicators and a well-being model. And also that the key message to politicians who are campaigning on economic growth, and we're going to see through the European elections next year, most of our elections that are coming up in the United States, in other parts of the world, it will be a growth platform. So what I said to the auditorium was people don't want economic growth. They want economic security. They want ecological stability. They want government investment in their future. And economic and financial systems that foster their well-being. That is what we want today. That is where we are in our consciousness. Let's make sure that every single policymaker is conscious of this fact and call them out. We call bullshit on your model of continuous economic growth because it actually is not working. People are getting poorer, people are getting miserable, people are getting sicker, and our planet is dying.
Right, what's the message? I think I'm very much aware that for this particular session, all the speakers are from the global north. And I think when we talk about degrowth and other models, they might not be the best to apply to different circumstances. So, for example, if we look at the global south, what's the way to this well-being economy in the global south, for example?
So in Earth for All and all the work that the Club of Rome does and its members, none of us are saying that the South needs to degrow. That would be absolutely ridiculous. First of all, if the South has not moved into a proper economic development model, and what do we call that in the first place, or if they have not reaped the benefits from economic development, it's because of neocolonialism, it's because of the way in which we have taken resources from the South and not ensured that the global commons are actually giving more prosperity to Southern nations. So we need to also, and that is the other elephant in the room, I mean, colonialism is a huge issue. We saw from the Doughnut economy presentation from Kate that the footprint in the South is much less than our own footprint. And let's remember that our footprint is also bringing in all the resources from the South. So how do we have that dialogue? The dialogue is one of, and by the way, many of these countries don't want to grow in the same way. Many of these countries understand the value of nature. Many of these countries have incredible indigenous people who are on the front lines to protect their forests, to protect their natural resources, and who are saying, this is our right, this is our land, this is our survival. So what we need to do is make sure that all of us, when we speak about a new growth model, we accept the responsibility of the North. We ensure that we reduce our consumption patterns. We enhance the way in which we work with the South in terms of our bilateral trade negotiations, in terms of the way in which, if we want to look at technology exchange and knowledge exchange, it is a proper exchange, not just us plundering and then not actually giving anything back. And most importantly, we absolutely have to take into consideration the transactional costs that have come from us reaping the benefits from the South and start to look at debt cancellation, special drawing rights. Many of the messages that we should be giving here in the next month when we have the Macron Summit, and I'm looking towards you, Philippe, when we're all here at the Macron Summit, we have to hold Macron accountable for a summit that fosters capital flows that go in the right direction. Because it's going pear-shaped. It is going pear-shaped right now behind the scenes. I know what the working groups are working on. They're not talking about wealth taxation. They're not talking about all the things that we need to talk about to make sure, and by the way, there aren't enough Southern nations at the table to even have the right conversation. So the South has to be part of the conversation. They also need to be able to be given a voice that is their own, that is a true voice. And let's not pretend that they want to have a capitalistic model like the West because we know best. Once again, I call bullshit on that one too.
Yeah. One last thing, obviously, you've mentioned it. There are a lot of very powerful people who are benefiting from the current system that will fight hard to keep the status quo. You know, you can, you've given ways to call them out, of course, but what can, you know, members of the audience here, what can they do to make sure they change? You know, to
I've got Lena whispering. She knows exactly what I'm going to say next. It's so funny. It's a perfect planted question. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the Change Now conference, but there are Change Now activists outside at the Total General Assembly. Right now, while we sit here talking to each other, they're all out there fighting and saying enough is enough, to windfall profits on the back of energy poverty, to the fact that Total and others have continued to invest in fossil energy. We know we have to pull out. That is one way to do it. I have my beautiful girlfriends, Adelaide, Anuna, Louisa. All of them are out there with so many others, incredible young women and men and scientists who are out there protesting right now. We need to continue to have those protests. We need to have the bravery to call out these incumbents, these stranded assets that are holding us back from truly moving towards a new type of model that makes us thrive as human beings and also ensures that we stay within the planetary boundaries. I was an advisor to the oil and gas sector for 10 years, including OPEC. I know their games. The fact that beyond petroleum is now firmly back to petroleum. I mean, let's be very clear. BP has transitioned and changed their name 3 times. They are now not only back to petroleum, they've withdrawn most of their investments in renewables because short-term profits. They know they can make more money right now off all of our backs, while we pay high energy prices. They are just having a good old time continuing to produce fossil energy and extract more. We have to do exactly what those incredible, brave people are doing, but we also needed to do it in the corridors of power. And I promise that I will continue to do what I can in the corridors of power as well.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. I'm sure you won't be alone. And I wish you lots of luck.
Can I just say one? Well,
yeah,
we're
out of time, but I still want to ask you one last thing.
Yeah.
We have all these young people who are protesting, etc. They've been doing that, you know, for a few years now. They've changed the discourse a little bit for a certain generation, I would say. But there is still the main narrative still needs to change if we have this, if we want to have this massive paradigm shift. So how do you change the narrative for real? So, you know, the media, politicians stop like praising a plan for growth, you know?
Yeah, this is why the systems approach is so important, and that's why I'm so proud to work for such an incredible organization like the Club of Rome. But also, I mean, let's be clear, last year, actually, DG Research and Innovation in the European Commission, and that's why I'm also proud to chair one of their incredible expert working groups, they changed their directorate name to People, Planet, and Prosperity. They actually changed their entire setup, their organogram, so they have people in charge of people, planet, prosperity with proper feedback loops to actually look at how we invest our Horizon funds in the future and how that actually treats all 3. We need to maximize the game changers in every single institution. I've set up a series of circles of trust. I actually was on the phone with incredible women in the Asian Development Bank this week, talking about how they could change the Asian Development Bank. I am setting up and having conversations with so many unbelievable people who are all realizing it's time for change. But we have to create that comfort for them as well, to come out, to feel comfortable with the right tools. That's what we try to do through Earth for All in our policy recommendations. Not to come in and give some kind of fuzzy, naive interpretation of how we can move forward. To be honest, yes, it's going to be hard. It's going to be complex. We can create 50 champions of change within our ecosystems from a business perspective. Here's how you can do it. Here are the incubators that are already doing it. And it's not just changing or bringing forward new entrepreneurs. It's working within organizations to talk about circularity, regenerative, which, by the way, saves money. We can talk about all of those things, but at the end of the day, I think it's fundamental that we remember that we also have to support each other as individuals. We have to support each other every single day because this is hard work. And I'm saying it from someone who's had a burnout, who herself has suffered from constantly fluctuating between despair and hope. But I do believe, and this is where I will finish, that there are several ways to remind ourselves to do that, and I'm going to play a little game. One way is to remember, and I think I said this yesterday, that there are 3 Ps we have to shift from every single morning when we wake up, and that's profit, power, and patriarchy. And there are 3 Ps that we need to move to, and that's people, planet, and prosperity. And to do that, we need to then introduce in our lives what I call the beautiful L's. There are limits, but we have to learn to live within limits. There are ways to learn, and we have to remember to learn from each other. And listen more than speak so that we can actually introduce valuable, game-changing solutions for all of us with great diversity. We have to laugh and remember when we actually need to lead so that we can be the legacy of a new type of model that fosters people and prosperity.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. What a way of finishing. Thank you. What a way of finishing. I think we're waiting up. Here it is. That's the final drawing from Fanny. You can see here. Look, I think it was a fascinating session. I hope you have a lot of useful insights, an action plan to take and apply to your own work. And enjoy the rest of the conference very much. Thank you very much.